and Linda. Welcome to today's live webinar titled The Lead Scoring Equation, Behavior plus Demographics equals Customers. Today's program is sponsored and presented to you by Acton. At this time, I would like to turn the call over to your presenters, Leo Merle and Linda West. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Bakiba. Thank you, Lauren, for this opportunity, and welcome, everyone. Really excited about discussing the lead scoring equation. I'm Leo Merle, Marketing Programs Manager of Acton Software, and joining me also of Acton Software and the Group Manager of Demand Gen is Linda West.
Hi there. Great to be here today talking about one of my favorite topics, lead scoring.
Same here, Linda. It's going to be a fun time and really looking forward to it. I know you and I get to present every so often, and it's a great opportunity to present again with you.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. Let's rock it.
Okay, and on that, we'll jump right in. And during our discussion, Linda and I will take turns covering the topics in the presentation. I'll give a little bit of background on demographics and highlight the layers of segmentation. Then I'll hand it off to Linda, who will do a deeper dive into the 3 layers of segmentation and then lead scoring programs. Then I'll cover the lead nurturing programs and how that will help you kind of focus on targeted messaging, utilizing the layers of segmentation Linda covers, and to make sure that you're delivering highly relevant messages. And at the end, we'll go ahead and have a Q&A session where you can actually submit your questions during the presentation, and as we go along, we may even just jump in and kind of give some answers to those questions right off the bat, especially if it's relevant to the conversation we're having at hand. So looking at the failure of demographics, with the evolution of technology, access to information and access to choice is now really, it's unlimited, where people can gather what kinds of information and how they're getting the access to it. And this has really created a paradigm shift in the marketing where consumers and not the advertisers are really defining the groups they wish to be a part of. And what that means is that people self-select into an increasingly complicated network of segments and subsegments. And on top of that, they rapidly move back and forth between those segments at their own discretion. So it's not really locked and loaded. The trends can be changing, the opinions be changing, and so you can find that the demographics that were traditional may not apply in today's market. And marketers have traditionally relied on the demographics to effectively segment, but the number of unifying demographics and characteristics between these groups is decreasing. So it seems like there could be just an overwhelming number of different groups based on characteristics, and marketers have tried to create more effective campaigns by slicing these demographic data into smaller and smaller pieces, but this doesn't always cut it, and it can be very time and budget intensive. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Linda, where she's going to take on digging in deeper to the 3 layers of segmentation. Linda, go ahead.
Okay, so the good news is that shift, that change from consumers sort of being identifiable by demographics to being in this completely fragmented world because of technology is not at all the end of the world for marketers, because all the tools and technology and the advantages that consumers have at their disposal that have increased their access to choice and access to information are also at the disposal of marketing teams. So the playing field is really level. Marketers can now collect information about consumers that go far beyond that demographic layer. So the new data gives marketers a much better indication of who will buy and not buy a product. And marketers can now collect information about consumers that goes into 3 distinct layers. First, we have the demographics layer. We're all really familiar with this layer as marketers. We've been using it since the dawn of time. And then second, we have the psychographics layer. So we're now kind of digging into psychological commonalities in our target audience versus just looking at those demographics. So what are their needs, their pain points, what keeps them up at night? And then last but not least, the behavioral layer. What are they actually doing? What activity can we track? How are they engaging with our brand? And these 3 layers together show us a lot about who consumers are and how qualified they are ultimately to buy your product. So I'll dig into these 3 layers of segmentation and talk to you about how you can collect the data, how you manage the data, and what they really mean. So first off, demographics. I'm going to spend absolutely no time on this layer because you've got this covered. This is a segmentation tactic that's been used by marketers forever. So not much to say here other than, okay, demographics and firmographics. You're looking at, your basics, age, gender skew, geos, and firmographics as well, job titles, company size, industry, those types of things. So these are things that really marketers have been working with for quite a while. And next, now I want to look at the persona, that second layer of data. This is where it starts to get interesting. This is where we're digging into data that a lot of marketers maybe aren't so familiar with. And psychographics, a lot of marketers refer to it as personas. This is where we take an educated guess about psychological commonalities in our target audience. And this goes beyond that surface level of age and income, and it looks at common motivators and pain points that unify groups within your target market. And this data isn't as straightforward to collect as that demographic data, and it can't always be directly attributed to a contact record for an individual. You can't exactly ask questions like, what is your goal in life, or what keeps you up at night on a contact form, and really expect to get any kind of serious answers from people that you're able to categorize. So instead, marketers consolidate this type of data by creating avatars for these groups of people based on those common characteristics. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. And I'm sure many of you are thinking, okay, so I can't collect this data on a form. I probably can't purchase it from a data warehouse. So how on earth do I go about getting this data? Well, there are a couple of ways you can do this, depending on your scale and depending on your budget. First, you can conduct focus groups with customers and potential customers. You can conduct even one-on-one interviews with customers or sit in on sales calls to gather some information about customers. Or alternatively, you can also just start by conducting internal interviews. Talk to your sales team, talk to your customer service team, your product team. You'd be really surprised at how much these folks know about your customers and about your prospects because they interact with them every day. And they probably have some really killer insight that you should be using in your marketing programs. So now let's go over a couple of the questions that you should be asking when you're conducting these interviews, whether it is internal, whether you're doing an internal brainstorm, or whether you're talking directly to prospects and customers. So remember, the object here is to identify commonalities and underlying patterns. So whether you conduct 10 interviews or one brainstorming session or 1,000 interviews, you need enough information to see very clear patterns and leanings. So a couple of suggested questions to consider. What's the person's job level and job function? What keeps them up at night? What are their personal and professional goals and aspirations? Where do they spend time online? What problems do you help them solve in their day-to-day lives? So how does your product help them in their day-to-day life? What does that look like? And what do these people perceive as valuable? And also, what are some common objections to your product or service offerings that this type of person might have to buying your product? So those are a couple of probing questions to consider. This is just a starting point, but they're a good start to just start kind of delving into the areas where you might find some good psychographic data. And oftentimes what happens is you'll conduct an internal brainstorming session first with your sales team, and that opens up all kinds of avenues of sort of subsets of questions that you can start asking if you're going to validate that with external people, with a focus group, with interviews, and things like that. And this is what a persona might actually look like. So back to that user profile, we've added that second layer of data now. And there's a bit more context around who this person is. She's an IT director. She is seeking a promotion within the next 12 months. It's very common for this type of person in this persona to be upward moving and to be ambitious. So they're probably looking at a promotion or moving up on the ladder. Characteristics, they're tech savvy, they're ambitious. They spend time online on industry blogs, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on Reddit. So, we're getting a much better picture of who this person is and the types of, potentially the types of marketing tactics that might appeal to them. Okay, next up, the behavioral layer, the third layer. This is where it gets really good, really interesting. Using behavioral data, we can tap into where the consumer is on their buyer's journey and target messages that will hit the right note at the right time in order to make that sales conversion. So we're tracking online interactions like email clicks, website visits, and social interactions. And we're tracking even offline interactions like attendance at events, sales conversations, those types of things, all to build up a picture of how close this person is to pulling the trigger on a purchase. And, the sales process is often very short with consumer. If you're in a B2C market, sometimes it'll be an hour or a day. In a B2B world, it's much longer, so it could be 6 months, even a year in some scenarios. So depending on what markets you operate in, this could be, your behavioral tracking to understand where they are or how close they are to making a purchase. Could be a very short window, could be a very long window. And remember, it's important to note that the buyer is absolutely in control here. They decide when it's the right time to buy. They decide what they want to consume, what type of information they need. But what you can do is predict exactly where they are in the decision process based on their behavior, and make sure you get in front of them when it counts. Make sure you're serving them content that's really relevant to them at that point, and it makes sense and helps them move along in their buyer's journey. So what types of data do you collect, and how do you do it? First off, how do you get a comprehensive picture of this stuff? Just 10 years ago, you had a web analytics tool that tracked web activity and an email tool that tracked email activity and an Excel spreadsheets that tracked event attendance. But, the marketing world has certainly evolved since then. And with marketing automation software, you can track all of this stuff in one place and tie all of that online and offline activity back to an individual contact record. So with marketing automation, you can look at this data on an aggregate level, but also look at this from an individual contact perspective and see that John Doe clicked on 2 web pages, opened an email, and visited your booth at a trade show. And that's useful in the one-on-one sales conversations that Joe or John Doe has with a sales rep, and also in serving him the correct and proper and helpful marketing messages that aren't going to kind of annoy him and make him think that you don't understand him or what he needs at that point in time. So just to reiterate the type of data we're collecting on this layer, we're looking at which pages users have visited, what type of content they're looking at online. We're looking at their email, their social activity. We're looking at event attendance and customer service interactions, really anything that is an engagement with your brand. So every time this person engages with your brand, it means something about who they are, what they want, and how close they are to making a purchase. So it's important that you start collecting that information and putting it, presenting it in a way that makes sense for the marketer and for the salesperson. And this is what it might look like on that same contact record. So now we're back to our user profile with that behavioral layer added in. And as you can see, it's becoming a pretty robust profile of this individual. We can see that this person visited the company website within the past week. He downloaded a white paper, or she downloaded a white paper comparing patch management software, which is a really strong indicator that she's looking to make a purchase in this area relatively soon. So we're building out this picture of a potential customer that we can use to make sure our sales messages are as effective as possible and really take into account the individual and where they are on their buying journey and how engaged they are with your brand. So now I want to dive into lead scoring, which is, in a way, how you actually use this data, how you use this data in a way that is tangible and, in this case, numerical as well. So how do you aggregate this data into an actionable format? And the answer is create a lead scoring program. So what is lead scoring? What am I talking about when I say lead scoring? So lead scoring is a system that automatically gives points to leads based on behaviors or profile attributes, based on those 3 layers of data. And it allows marketing and sales to really sort and prioritize leads based on those point values. And lower scoring leads that either aren't a really good profile match or aren't very engaged with your brand can be, sent to marketing, and marketing can nurture those contacts and start sending campaigns to them to get them more engaged or to learn more about them. And then the higher scoring leads are sent off to sales for sales conversations, because they're really ready. They're at a point in time where they're probably close to making a purchase and are probably ready for a sales conversation. So lead scoring gives you a way of actually using this data in your sales and marketing processes. So lead scoring is an objective system for ranking your leads. It's not, the opinion of the salesperson or the marketer. It's a very objective system that you can apply across all of your leads or all of your contacts to make sure that, you're all looking at the same view of the universe. And it's great for sales and marketing alignment because you're also looking, you're all looking at the same data. But also just from sales rep to sales rep or from marketer to marketer, you can speak the same language. And most scoring systems use ranking criteria that fall into two distinct categories. Profile 1 answers the question, is the prospect qualified to buy? So this looks at demographic and firmographic information and that persona information to see, okay, is this an ideal buyer? Does this person fit the profile of a buyer that would normally buy my product? Are they in the right geo? Do they have the right budget? Are they at the right company size, industry, those types of things? So are they qualified to buy? We can rank those factors. And then group 2 looks at their behavior. And this answers the question, is the user engaged with the brand? Is the user, interacting with you at this point in time that might indicate that they might be ready to make a purchase? So this category measures that digital body language, like the email clicks, website visits, etc., and answers that question, is the user engaged? Where is that user on their buyer's journey? So to show you what a lead scoring program might look like and how this will actually play out, I want to walk you through a quick example. So theoretically, in this example, you're a small software company that sells patch management software. You have 2 offices, one in Asia and one in the U.S., but you aren't global yet, so you can't sell into every region. And also, your software isn't cheap. It's a larger budget solution, so you need prospects with reasonably large budgets. So this is what the profile score for that particular company might look like. High titles get higher scores, so that first line on job title. Low titles maybe get mid-point scores, and then unrelated titles will get negative scores. So we don't want those to be considered good prospects. So in the job title category, an IT director gets 5 points, a systems administrator gets 3 points, and a student gets negative 10 points because we really don't consider that someone who's qualified to buy. So we don't want to elevate that person to sales. And they aren't able to sell into certain regions. So those leads that come in or prospects or contacts that they have in their database outside of their region would get lower scores or negative scores because they can't sell to them. So we want to make sure that the contacts that are in the regions that are most productive are going to have a higher score. So the U.S. contacts, 5 points. In Hong Kong, for example, 4 points, and then Romania, negative 5 points, because we cannot sell into that region. So if you move down, we're looking at a couple of other profile criteria, including company size, industry, and budget. So that's how this might play out for group 1. So now let's take a look at group 2. Now we're answering the question, is the user engaged with the brand? We're looking at that behavior. And in this, to me, this is really the cool part. This is the part that marketing historically has never really had access to, but technology has evolved to the point where we can see this type of information and we can score it. So actions like downloading white papers and browsing multiple times a day on your website indicate high interest. So we give those high scores. We give those behaviors higher scores. But visiting a jobs page indicates that the person that you're tracking isn't a prospect, but maybe a potential job applicant. So they'll probably get a negative score for visiting your careers page because they're not a sales lead. They're probably just a potential employee. which is still good, but it indicates a very different intent from a buying intent. So we can categorize those types of activities and behaviors. And for example, if an IT director is looking at your pricing page and you're scoring your pricing page at 50 points or 15 points or whatever your scale is, you can see that immediately because that lead will get a higher score and be elevated immediately in your sales and marketing processes. So this is how it might apply to that profile that we built out earlier in the presentation. So this is applying that lead scoring model. She gets 5 points for being in the target geographic region. She's in New York, so she's in the U.S. She gets 5 points. She gets 5 points for being an IT director. That's a high title, so she's a good potential lead. And then on the activity side, she gets 5 points for downloading that white paper on patch management software. And then another 5 for visiting the website multiple times in the past 7 days. So it's a total of 20 points for this lead. So this is a pretty good scoring lead and a good potential prospect for our sales team. So, we could elevate her to the sales team. She's got 20 points. She's ready to go, and the sales team can look at this profile and understand why she's a hot prospect and see where those points are coming from. Now I want to go over a couple of stats with you just to look at the importance of lead scoring. So up to 70% of sales-ready leads are not properly leveraged or are completely ignored by the sales team, thus wasting marketing program dollars. And this is not because salespeople are lazy or salespeople, don't want to follow up. It's because, all the leads look the same. So if you give them a way to rank and prioritize leads, it helps them tackle the hottest leads first in a very objective way. So they're not just sort of lost in trying to kind of go through the same process with every lead. You're really elevating the best ones so that they can use their time wisely, and this will help certainly help that issue. And 84% of survey respondents, according to a Marketing Sherpa study, said that their primary reason for implementing a lead scoring system was to achieve added revenue. So it adds to the bottom line. It really does help to prioritize hotter leads, so those are followed up on first, and it increases your efficiency to closed-won deals. And then last but not least, the impact of lead scoring. The average lead generation ROI for organizations using a lead scoring process is 138% versus just 78% for lead generation ROI for those who are not using a lead scoring process. So I don't know about you, but I will take 138% any day over 78. So really important. Organizations are seeing a lot of success with this method. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Leo for a look at lead nurturing and how to start building up the activity of your contact database.
Great. Thanks so much, Linda. I really enjoyed that portion as it covers some of the specifics and the importance of building up the buyer personas. And, with that foundation that you kind of laid out for us and having it in place, you can then take that next step and move forward to create a proper lead scoring system and the behavioral rules actually needed to drive activity that builds up the score for that particular prospect. And that's where the lead nurturing comes into play. So there may be a question that you're asking yourself, and in order to encourage more interaction and drive engagement with your brand, you'll need to set up a lead nurturing program. And utilizing the aspects of what Linda covered, this will help you stay in front of prospects and provide them information based on their interest. And it's really important that what you're serving up is what they're interested in reading about or looking at to become more informed about your business and your product and your service or whatever it is that you may be providing to them. So I like to share statistics as well, and it really helps highlight the types of trends that we're seeing. And this result is from Serious Decision, who conducted a survey and found that 80% of the prospects deemed bad leads by sales go on to buy within 24 months. And what this tells me is that the odds are the prospect you're nurturing is going to make a purchase within really a relatively short period of time. So you want to ensure the processes that you have in place to evaluate a so-called good lead versus a bad lead really has to be robust. And you don't want to nurture a lead and get them warmed up and deem them as a bad lead, and then they go off to your competitor to make a purchase. You've basically done all the work for them, and then your competitor actually reaps the benefits of you doing that. The user profile is primarily composed of the demographic and firmographic data, but some elements of persona might also come into play here, and that's like asking, what's your biggest challenge in IT today on a lead gen form? And it's important to take away from this that you really want to know that using your automated email programs for your lead nurturing is going to save you valuable staff time while allowing you to focus on creating more targeted messaging, which should be based on the 3 layers of information that you're collecting. And when you look at the demographic side, for example, you can use dynamic content within emails to speak differently to small companies versus enterprises, because different sized companies often have different needs, and you'll want to address those in your message. And you want your prospects to really feel like you're talking to them individually. On the persona side, the messages can be targeted based on the persona information as well, so showing how to solve a specific pain point, perhaps, or positioning the message around specific goals and aspirations that your prospects are trying to accomplish. And when you are speaking to them in that manner, it feels like you're talking to them directly, and if they feel that way, then you're building more of that relationship that I referred to previously, where you're kind of nurturing them and they feel like you're a good source of information for them. And on the behavior side, the information that you're gathering from what they're doing, how they're behaving on your site, what they're downloading, you can actually create triggered messages based on an action that they took. So with this, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper and take a look at kind of some examples of what I'm referring to. Here's an example of building a multi-stage asset in which we tie related offers together in this logical progression to help educate and accelerate the prospects through their buying cycle. And what this lead nurturing stream demonstrates is how someone found you via search and submitted a form to download a white paper. And this kind of walks you through all of those steps. But from there, there's a confirmation email that's going to be triggered with a link to the asset for future reference. And many times, the prospects, they'll download a white paper with the goal of reading it, but other priorities can sidetrack even the best intention of what happens. And that white paper may not be consumed right away. And I'm sure we're all kind of guilty of that, where you find something interesting, and then you download the white paper, you're going to read it, and then, like I said, you get sidetracked, and it's hard to come back to that. But with the confirmation email, the prospect has the opportunity to actually refer back to it in case they need it for future reference. So maybe they did read it, but it's been a while, and they wanted to remember where that white paper was. They can refer to it back to that email. And since you now have the prospect's email because they filled that out when they first downloaded the white paper, you can then send them an email promoting a recorded webinar on a similar topic, maybe an ebook or possibly an infographic. And with this type of variety available, the type of, I'm referring to the content variety, you're able to switch out the types of content, which really makes it helpful as people consume information in different ways. Some would rather possibly download and read an ebook, while someone else may want to get the information in a webinar format, kind of like what we're doing today. So being able to provide that type of variety is really important. And the bottom line here is that the variety will increase the opportunities for engagement with your prospects, because even though it's something they may have consumed already, they may be reading it in a different way, or they may have to provide it to somebody else within the organization that may not have time to read a white paper, but they do have time to look at an infographic. And the infographic itself gets the key points across, and if they need to, they can refer back to that white paper. Here's another statistic I'd like to share. According to Forrester Research, companies that excel at lead nurturing generate 50% more sales-ready leads at 33% lower cost. So if you've worked through the layers of segmentation, you've developed this comprehensive lead scoring strategy and you have a robust lead nurturing process in place, you should be seeing an improvement in the number of sales-ready leads with a lower cost to you. And that's where you really get the great ROI on your investment, is that once you've developed this type of program and you have it in place, you can, after, let's say, a quarter or two, you can really see how the results are changing for you in that aspect. One of the keys to having a lead scoring system and the behavioral rules is that you need to drive activity to build up that score. And that's where lead nurturing really comes into play. Now, I know you've probably heard this before, that content is king, but content really is king. And there are a couple of things you need to keep in mind as you're developing it. As you develop a curriculum and you come up with this content plan, it really needs to match the buyer personas that you've identified. So you want to stick with developing content around those personas and track how successful your campaigns are. And I know Linda's alluded to it, I've kind of alluded to it, but you really want to kind of take an inventory as you're progressing down this journey. And as you go along, you want to have some metrics in place that kind of look back to see how are we doing. And you need to have some sort of litmus test on what's working and what isn't. And since the content is king, you really want to be able to make sure that the content you're developing is reinforcing those messages. And if you're doing that, you become this trusted advisor by educating before you're selling. And that's really a key point. If you've developed this content around educating your prospects, many of them are looking for that kind of information, and they want to gather this information about your company. They want to look at the types of products, services, and maybe solutions that you're providing, but they also are looking at your competitors and possibly alternative options and solutions. So if you become this trusted source of information and they're basically looking at you as the first source, or they want to continue to engage with you, you continue to develop this content so you can stay top of mind with them. And when they're ready to purchase, they're going to be thinking of you. Of course, you do need to pepper in some of the aspects of selling your company and whatever your solution may be, so they really do know you as a comprehensive solution for what they're looking at. And you need to be sure that you're really reinforcing the content you're developing across multiple channels. So we kind of alluded to this in the previous slide about the buyer journey and developing content that they're downloading, but each touch point that you create needs to be consistent. So if you developed a white paper, you can maybe do a webinar around it and do an infograph. Those all reinforce the initial message and overall message that you're creating. So you want to be consistent in that aspect. And one thing you want to keep in mind, and it may be cost prohibitive to do often, but you will want to reevaluate your personas periodically to ensure you've adapted to any changes in your target audience, and providing content that hits the mark for them is very important. So it kind of reinforces that point I was mentioning about developing the content to help educate them and move them along that journey, but do the light sell, and as you get further down their funnel, that you do more of a sell to kind of convert them over. Remember all that persona data that wasn't used in the scoring program? Well, it makes for a great way of determining content positioning and promotional channels. And as you're developing your content, use the persona characteristics you created to guide your message positioning and what you're putting out there. And Linda put that in a very great capsule. There's some great content that's in this deck that you'll be able to download after the presentation. And as you're doing it, make sure that you have your goals in mind. And in this case, the goals were the individual, this persona, was seeking a promotion within 12 months. They're really tech savvy, and they're online quite a bit, doing industry blogs and Twitter. They're LinkedIn, using Reddit. And when you're developing content around that, if it's reinforcing what that buyer persona is, you have a better likelihood of bringing them over to your type of solution or looking to you as the source of information that they need to make their next decision. And marketing automation provides organization to an otherwise cluttered world where every prospect could look the same to you. And when marketing automation feeds the sales process, a contact can go from being simply one more name on a list of names to becoming a unique prospect with known interests and observed behaviors. So the example that you see here is we can see how often this individual visited the website, what emails they've opened, if they've attended any webinars, and that kind of information can really help you when determining your next steps of engagement with a prospect. And through this behavioral and attribute profiling, marketing can really create segments that have meaning for sales messaging. The email templates crafted to match the messaging to the prospect's pain, it makes it a lot easier for the sales team to reach out quickly and accurately. So if the email messaging speaks specific to the behavior of this particular prospect, then that's going to be easy conversation for sales to pick up. And the hot leads really will reveal themselves through behavioral activities. And if you've set up the lead scoring properly, earning scores that automatically place them sales ready in a prioritized call list is something that's an added benefit of being able to do that. When looking at website visitor tracking, it really provides sales with a real-time monitor and alerts system for prospect engagement. So the salespeople can set alerts to get real-time notifications when prospects or customers visit your website or maybe even a key page. And this type of timely engagement when a prospect most likely ready to have a conversation can be fed in right up to the sales team so they can reach out to them. And it makes it for a much more productive phone call. And that's really a great aspect of marketing automation, that it really does have the ability to identify and surface up those prospects with a really high probability of buying or at least moving to the next stage of the buying process. And looking at the offline messaging and the sales intelligence, think of this as kind of aggregate data for reporting and trend watching, and aggregate data on an individual that indicates their next steps. Marketing automation reports on campaign results and conversions, helping marketing become more accountable for a portion of the sales revenue that traditionally they may have been siloed from sales, but now marketing is part of that profit continuum, and you can really see the campaign results and conversions by being able to do that. Looking at the inbound marketing, the marketing automation can actually track AdWord conversions, which provides intelligence and guidance for like your social media team and determining what types of budget you're going to cut aside for it, and looking at keyword optimization, because the AdWords obviously shows up in the conversations, what's actually working well and which organic searches are taking place. So that really helps you be more effective in when you're reaching out to these prospects. And from a marketing database access side, sales can really access entries in the marketing database from their Salesforce automation dashboard or whatever CRM they have in place, and they can see the aggregate data, including demographic and behavioral data, search terms that may have been used. And holistically, they can see that the data provides intelligence that the sales rep will actually use when they're taking that next step, including knowing when the customer is ready to buy and when it's time to actually close a deal. So those conversations are a lot more productive. And with that, there's a couple next steps that Linda's going to go ahead and summarize for us.
Awesome. Thank you, Leo. So I want to wrap up before we go into Q&A and just talk about what your next steps are if you want to action this type of data or this type of methodology right away. So first and foremost, you should take an inventory of what you already have in your database. So what data do you already have available in those three distinct layers: firmographics and demographics, persona data, so have you started tagging personas on each of your contact records, and then also behavioral data. Do you have that stuff flowing into one place, or do you have it available in your database? And second, map out those three layers. Map out what you want to track at each of those three layers, what you want to see at each of those three layers, so that you can kind of compare that back to what you have existing and get input from multiple teams, because the sales team might want to see different types of demographic or firmographic data than maybe your marketing team does. So make sure you get input from multiple sources so that you know what type of data you need to start collecting, whether that's on forms or whether that's through an analytics tool, et cetera. And then third, investigate now, once you've mapped that out, applying lead nurturing and lead scoring programs to that data set. And this is executed through a marketing automation platform. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Leo for some Q&A. Actually, we're going to pass it to back to Lorman first for if there's any audio Q&A, and then we'll take the questions that you've submitted in the platform, the text questions after that.
Great, thank you. And we'll wait for our first question, Leo and Linda.
There's actually a question that came in that I thought we could go ahead and just jump on, and I'll let Linda take this one. Linda, the question that came in is, how often do you recommend evaluating and updating your lead scoring?
That's a really good question. I think for us, we do it every quarter. It's important to keep it fresh, to keep an eye on if it's working or if it's not working, and always review it and evaluate it alongside your sales and marketing team. So make sure both representatives from both teams are in the room. I would recommend at minimum doing it twice a year because it is something that changes. Behavior changes and interests change and markets change, so make sure you're keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, it's a great point, Linda. And I think one of the key ingredients, or at least the secret sauce, is having the sales and marketing team well aligned to make sure that when you're going down this path of identifying your personas or lead scoring, that everybody's on the same page. I think that's a really key point. There's a couple questions that have come in, and I know it was pertaining to downloading the content or the slides, and I do know that Lorman will make it available to everybody on the line, as well as anybody who registered that wasn't able to attend. So rest assured you will be receiving that, and I do believe they'll also be including a recording of today's session. There's another question that came in, Linda. I'll go ahead and take a first stab at it, and then you can jump on it. How do you know which activities should be scored higher when evaluating a scoring structure for leads? So when you're looking at the types of content that you're already putting out there, you know which assets are pretty much more valuable than others. Not that some are not valuable. It's just some tend to rank a little bit higher. You tend to use it a little more often. You've been getting feedback. So you'll have to just kind of pursue that and kind of come up with some scoring that's going to work for you. Not that 1 point is good or 20 is the best. It can be a variety of different points associated with a piece of content. But one thing is you just have to start doing it. You get out there, you start putting scores against certain types of content and see what's happening. And based on the types of conversions you're seeing and conversations that sales reps may be having when they're engaging with prospects, you'll have to feed that back into how you're doing your scoring and then make some adjustments. And you'll have to just track this over time. There's no real perfect solution associated with a particular industry or type of product or service. You just have to kind of do it on your own. Linda, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
No, actually, I think that's some great advice. And we had another question come in about buyer personas. How can you correlate the buyer persona with the behavior? If the persona is a general description and the behavioral is actual actions in the automation tool, how do you get the two together? That is a great question. So essentially with a persona is an avatar, right? It's a group of people that you say, this is generally what the persona is. These are the common characteristics. And then you can start tagging people in your database that relate to that persona. So, for example, one of the personas that we target are agency executives, marketing, people who work at marketing agencies or own an agency. So if someone comes to my website and downloads a white paper about how to improve your agency pitch, I can make a pretty good guess about which persona they're a part of. So you can do that through their activity. You can infer what persona they're a part of and tag that in your database, or do it even based on the demographic and firmographic data that you have. We do it based on job title as well. So if the title is partner and the the company type is an agency, well, we can make we know that they're part of that persona, and we can tag that record accordingly and start serving them content in that particular area.
Yeah, it's a good point, Linda. Thanks for answering that one, because I know that it's the top of mind for lots of companies that are looking at how are we going to come up with a lead scoring, and how are we going to nurture our prospects, and how do we create the personas associated with them. There's another question that came in that I wanted to go ahead and take first, and then if you want to add any points to it, that'd be great. Who ultimately owns creating personas for lead scoring? And the question continues, are there any instances where marketing's view of a persona or lead score should override sales opinion? And we kind of alluded to this earlier about this whole sales and marketing alignment, but it goes a little deeper than just the sales and marketing. If you have customer support or technical support, it's really important to understand the full life cycle, not only of when you have identified a prospect, but what happens after they've converted and it's an actual customer and they're paying and they've been with you for 3 months or 6 months or a year or two. And understanding that entire life cycle to make sure that what attracted them in the first place to come through, and then what are some of the problems they faced along that journey. And during that journey, they're going to touch sales, they're going to touch marketing, or at least activities that marketing has conducted, as well as tech support and customer support. So it's really important to recognize that it's not just one group that creates the personas. It may be marketing that finalizes it, but you really have to kind of go out and talk to the rest of the organization and understand, what is it that's going on and what types of ingredients are we really looking for our key target audience and those personas that we need to create. And you can even talk to some of your customers. Find out, what brought them on board in the first place. What do they like about you? What areas of improvement do you think you can do that would make them, an advocate of your brand more than just, well, we pay the bill. So I think those are some of the things you need to look at and consider as you're developing these personas. Linda, did you have any other points you wanted to raise on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point, Leo. I mean, it's not really about just the marketing view or just the sales view or just any view. It's about the comprehensive picture of who this person is and making sure that that is consistent across all of your teams. So what I think is really important is to get agreement between marketing and sales, especially between marketing and sales. A lead scoring program often acts as an SLA. It is, an agreement between marketing and sales on what is considered a good lead. And this isn't something that either team can do on their own, because if you're shooting yourself in the foot if you try to do it on your own. It has to be an agreement between both teams. They need to, both teams, sales and marketing particularly, have to have buy-in on this, because a marketing person has less direct contact with a customer than a salesperson does. They're not the ones actually making the calls and determining if a lead needs to be disqualified or returned to marketing, or if they're going to try to work a deal. They have a lot of that direct experience and knowledge, and they're going to know what attributes and characteristics they find easier to work with, and that they can, really turn into an opportunity. And you cannot ignore that. It really has to be an agreement between both sides, and there has to be compromise. And if you can do that, if you can align, along those attributes and along, a lead scoring threshold, for example. So if you determine that a lead is only qualified if it's 15 points or up, or 20 points or up, or whatever your threshold is, it becomes a way for sales to say, okay, every lead that marketing is sending me is qualified, it's quality, and I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that lead is worked. And they have confidence in that lead that comes in. And marketing can kind of get an agreement from sales, if they're saying, I'm going to send you this quality of leads, but you also have to agree that you're going to follow up in this time period, or whatever the case may be. And then from the sales side, they know that it's quality, and the marketing side can get sort of buy-in and know that the leads are going to be followed up on, and it really aligns both teams so that there is this continuation that Leo talked about, you're looking at the customer's life cycle and you're looking at their evolution versus just kind of having a single view, like marketing, I generated a lead, I passed it off, my job is done, because that's not really how it works, and it's not really fair to the customer either.
Yes, that's completely agree with everything you said to that, Linda. And it could seem to be a daunting task, but you probably have a better relationship than you realize, and just going down that path and talking with the other teams to develop some rapport if there hasn't been some there before. It shouldn't be too hard, and that kind of takes me to the next question that came in, because as you were mentioning that, Linda, somebody asked, what are some tips you have for aligning marketing and sales? So I know that internally what we do is we actually sit within the sales department, our marketing team and demand gen team. So we're surrounded by sales, and we also sit right next to the sales development representatives of our company. So we hear what's working for them. So when we launch a campaign, if it's a webinar, if we do a white paper, if there's an email campaign we've done, we can hear from feedback, or we may even overhear a phone call from one of the representatives as to how that's going. And they are open to coming over to us and saying, hey, that campaign you just did, you guys hit the mark on that one, and it's really working well. Or we'll hear, it didn't work on that one. We need to figure out what to do. So for us, that secret sauce is that we're really well aligned with the sales team. We're also really well aligned with our customer success managers, and we do some kind of team building exercises within the office where we'll have lunch catered in, and we'll start having lunch with them and find out what are some of the problems that they're running into and what can we do to help improve. And that really does lend itself for us to develop a more robust marketing and demand gen program, because we're hearing what's working, and we understand if something goes out there, what's not right, what needs to be tweaked. And those that do work, then we can really hit the mark. And I know Linda and I sit right next to one another, but I'll let her kind of add additional comments too as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. It's a huge benefit for the marketing team here at Act-On to sit really in close proximity. If you don't sit next to your sales team, and that's not a possibility. Another thing you can do is just ask a sales rep to listen in on a couple of calls, maybe ghost a couple of their sales calls, just to get a better understanding of the process that they go through and the objections that they come up against, and how the leads that you're generating or the programs that you're running are actually playing out in terms of closing deals. That's very helpful and something that we definitely do here at Act-On. So if you haven't done that and you're in marketing, I would absolutely recommend it.
So true. Thanks for that, Linda. A couple more questions have come in, and I'll let you take this one. Linda, as you look to the future, what do you see as the next big thing for lead scoring?
That's a good question. I think that a lot of businesses are especially in the mid-market and smaller businesses, are really just getting into this world. So part of it is just that it's going to really become a standard, right? So right now it's not standard practice for mid-market companies, but it will be standard practice. It's going to become an essential must-have. It already is, really. All the top performers are using it. So if you want to kind of be in that top-tier category and get that efficiency, it's definitely an essential. But I think just the volume of companies using it will absolutely continue to increase. It's that's the way it's trending. And also, I've seen some interesting things done recently with lookalike models. So what do your customers look like? Doing an analysis of your current customer base, and then trying to model your scoring after that. So everything from company size and industry, and whether if they're a startup, if they've recently received a round of funding, and finding companies that are lookalikes to those. And that's a really smart way to go about it, especially if you're first starting out in lead nurturing and lead scoring, doing some analysis on your customer base and replicating that in your scoring model.
Yep, so true, Linda. There was another question that came in, and it kind of ties to what you were just mentioning, too, about the whole lead scoring aspect. But I wanted to get this one out there. We've got a few minutes left, and it's a pretty long question, but I do like the aspect of this, because I know it's something that I'm sure a lot of businesses are struggling with or trying to identify. And the question is, what do you suggest when online data, so things like web visits, email clicks, what if those are not integrated with your CRM platform for the various campaigns that you're running? And this individual is asking, do you think a successful lead scoring program can be deployed without the online data, or is it essential?
That's a great question. So do I think it's essential to have that data integrated? Absolutely. I think you're going to get the lift that you get with lead scoring. Really the juicy stuff, from my opinion, is that behavioral data. Because even if you have exact match profiles all day long, if they're not engaged with your brand and you're not educating them and nurturing them into hot prospects, and you don't have visibility into that process, it's much more difficult to develop an efficient lead scoring model. You can do it as a starting point, absolutely, but I think it's going to be much more, you're going to have more impact if you go kind of with the full banana. So, and the way that you do it is via a marketing automation platform. So marketing automation is really the backbone of marketing technology. It links into your CRM. You can connect all kinds of other marketing technologies. If you're using video, if you're using social, you can link in all those channels to pull in all that behavioral data, all that juice into your marketing automation platform and pump it into your CRM. That is the method that marketers are using now. Marketing automation really does play a key central role for marketers now, and it's the equivalent of the CRM for marketers. And oftentimes it plays a more central role in the CRM now because you have all of that behavioral data there. And there's more data in your marketing automation platform than there is in a CRM. And the two talk to each other, but it is, that's where all the behavioral stuff happens. That's where the journey begins, so to speak. So if you're using CRM now, adding marketing automation to the mix is definitely going to increase the value that you can provide in terms of your bottom line.
Yep, a very good point, Linda. And I'm just looking at the time that we have remaining, just a couple minutes, but I think this question's come through from a couple folks, and it's pertaining to a small company, and it ties to what you were just talking about. But this individual is asking, I work in a small company without a lot of data. Where's the best place to start to develop a lead scoring system?
That's a good question. I think I would kind of go back to looking at your current customer base. Check them out. What did they do before they bought your product? And what do they look like? What are common demographic and firmographic characteristics so you can kind of tackle both sides? What did they do? How did they engage with you before they bought? And what does their profile look like? Use your current customer base as your knowledge point, and also have discussions with your sales team and your customer service team and your marketing team. Make sure they're all kind of contributing to this process. That's going to give you a really good pool of knowledge to start from, we actually, if you're just getting started, we actually do have a workbook to guide you through the process of setting one up, which we will make sure to email out to everybody after the presentation if anyone's interested in that, to get you started. But it's, again, it's really, you'd be surprised at what you have already in terms of internal knowledge from your current customer base and from just talking to your sales team and other teams around the business.
Good point, Linda. Thank you for that. And just looking at time, we want to cut you loose a little bit early. And I wanted to thank Akiba as well as Lorman for the opportunity to present today. Linda, it was great to present with you as well.
Thank you, Leo. Always a pleasure.
And with that, Akiba, we turn it back to you for any closing comments. And thanks again.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Leo and Linda. If you enjoyed today's program and would like more information from Act On, please call 916-462-3924. Again, that number is 916-462-3924.